Let's return now to the election campaign and our regular Monday panel, Simon Banks and Peter McGauran. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Peter McGauran, what do you make of the move by Peter Dutton to shelve the argument about work from home? I had heard from a number of Liberal campaigns that it was biting. Clearly it was for him to make such a clear backflip at after the first week of the campaign, Peter.
Could have done without it, but now he has to move on, just take his medicine. There's no other way to approach the issue. On the Richter scale, it's not up there with a 6-point earthquake, but it's an unnecessary distraction, but a short-lived one. Of more concern is, of course, the Newspoll that has the Albanese government now on a 52-48 two-party preferred basis. Again, early stages of the campaign, it's still a close poll in itself. So I think it's business as usual. This is a fight to the death.
Simon, do you think that the two things are linked? I spoke to Simon Benson earlier. He thought that the dip in the poll is in part because of this other policy, the work from home argument that had been seen as the thin edge of the wedge by a lot of voters.
Yeah, look, I can say, Kieran, I know a lot of Labor MPs have just had people just voluntarily raising this on the doors. They didn't even need to open up the conversation. People were very, concerned about it. Absolute barbecue stopper, if you like, during this election campaign. And look, if it was just this one policy that the coalition had got wrong, then you might be able to give them a bit of a leave pass. It's still early in the campaign, as Peter said, but it's increasingly obvious whether it's their nuclear policy, their energy policy, their public service policy, even their international student policy released yesterday. They just don't seem to have done the homework to think through the implications that are flowing from these policies that they're putting forward. And I think we may see more backflips yet to come.
We saw, Peter, you mentioned that reference to the Richter scale. What is, I think, shaking a lot of people is the markets right now, and that is obviously the backdrop for this campaign. It's the backdrop for the first debate as well, which I'm delighted to say will be right here on Sky News, the Sky News Daily Telegraph People's Forum. And you've got this uncertainty, the volatility erupting internationally on the markets.
True, but there's been a cigarette paper thinness between Dutton and Albanese in how to respond to President Trump's tariffs. So I don't know that there'll be any mileage from either side on that. I think the slip-ups, and there's no other way to put it, mildly, in regard to working from home and the dismissal of 41,000 public servants, is to refocus now on what is the core strategy of the campaign, and it's got to be cost of living. Somehow, Peter Dutton's got to get back to holding Albanese and his government entirely liable and responsible for the fall in living standards. And I think in the first week, they covered too many topics: immigration, defence, national security. Go back to cost of living. They're mad as hell in Victoria. They're not as mad as hell elsewhere across the continent, and we're not seeing the traditional opposition attack campaign on a sitting government that is very vulnerable.
Peter, just on that issue of Trump, has that suggestion of the work from home and the cuts on the public service and the Minister of Government Efficiency, if they win, which the opposition leader promised, has that given Labor enough to work with to say that Peter Dutton is trying to emulate Donald Trump essentially in some areas?
Not entirely, but it creates a shadow that you could do that you'd rather not have. In themselves, without Trump, they would have been legitimate campaign policies, but with the backdrop of Trump, it does look as if you are following him too closely. So I don't think it's not fatal, but let's get back to cost of living, or that will be fatal.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's the key, and has been for so long, Simon. The challenge, I guess, is there is still a strong cohort, I think, certainly within the Conservative side of things, and you see Clive Palmer trying to tap into it, who still have sympathy and support for Trump's approach. But then there's the middle ground, and the majority of Australians by the polls suggest they don't like what they see with Donald Trump. And they don't want anything like it.
Well, you only have to look at the bloodbath on the Australian stock market today, which is a direct result of President Trump's tariff policies. I think Australians are very concerned around these issues. And you're dead right, Kieran. I think Peter Dutton's tried to walk a fine line. He's tried to be a bit Trumpy, but pretend that he's not Trump at the same time. And the problem is that even when, for example, President Trump announced those thoroughly unjustified tariffs last week, he was still blaming the Australian government for the actions of the US president. I think Australians heard that message loud and clear, that ultimately he's not on Australia's side, that he quite likes what President Trump is doing, the uncertainty that he's creating. He likes to feed off that environment because he thinks he is a national security guy, that he benefits from that uncertainty. But the truth is Australians don't like it. They don't want it here. They want to defend Medicare. They want to defend the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. They're going to defend our biosecurity arrangements. And I think Dutton's problem is that he's caught both to the centre and to the far right in this debate. He's neither of those two camps, and I think both camps are coming hunting for him.
Peter McGauran, finally, gents, I want to get your assessment and preview of the People's Forum tomorrow night. It's 100 undecided voters in the room in Western Sydney. A key moment, I think, in the campaign for so many different reasons, not the least of which is Peter Dutton's keenness to try and seize a bit of momentum at Peter McGauran, and to do it, to eyeball Anthony Albanese as he does it, it's an important moment for him.
Look, I'm anticipating the town hall with glee, Kieran, because I think this is a Peter Dutton natural forum. He's a decent man. He's highly experienced and knowledgeable. He's not a showman. He's not the world's best retail politician, clearly, and I think there is a chance in a forum such as this for people to have a new regard for him.
Simon, your thoughts?
Well, I think there was an interesting poll that came out over the weekend, which is who would you rather have a beer with? And Albo came out top of that pops. Look, the beauty of this type of forum, Kieran, is that policies like work for home would come up through it, because these are actually the conversations that Australians are having around the kitchen table, in their offices, at their workplace, or out in the community at the weekend sport. I think it gives ordinary Australians that great opportunity to ask those questions directly to the politicians themselves, and I think will be really great to see how they answer.
Yeah, looking forward to it. 7:30 p.m. tomorrow night, right here on Sky News, gents. Look forward to seeing you both next week. Thanks as always.